I'm Martha MacCallum in New York. Tonight on The Story, the president gets his Secretary of State. And finally, a year in the making, Rick Grinnell is now in place as the ambassador to Germany. All of that coming up in a moment. But first, we get a look at the meeting as well between Kim Jong-un and now Secretary Pompeo. Look at these fascinating pictures. We're going to dig into what was going on there as we learn that the president will also now head to the United Kingdom. His schedule is filling up. He will speak with Prime Minister May in mid-July. And here at home, we are waiting for several things, one of which is that Inspector General report, which is supposed to roll out shortly on the Hillary Clinton investigation and the role that the DOJ and the FBI played in it leading up to the 2016 election. There are a lot of questions about the then FBI director's actions. Brett took them head on tonight, and we will get reaction from the Trump campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, as well. But, Brett, we start with you tonight. Busy evening, to be sure. So many interesting moments in that interview that you just did with James Comey. What stands out to you?
Well, first, that he actually showed up. The traffic was literally, we were getting updates, 9th and Constitution, New Jersey.
Right.
So we kind of shifted things around. But what stood out to me substantively was, one, that he says to this day, he doesn't definitively know that the dossier was funded by the DNC and Hillary Clinton. I find that fascinating. I find it interesting. I think as you're presenting the dossier as a reason to surveil Carter Page to a FISA court, why don't you know? And when you're saying to President-elect Trump what exactly it is, it's unverified and salacious, but it's funded by your opponent. I don't know the answer to that. So I thought that was really what stuck out in my mind.
I totally agree with you. I mean, there was like a deer in the headlights look, like, gee, I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea who paid for it. You know, we didn't really look into that. This is the head of the Investigative Bureau of the United States. These are the basic questions that anybody would want to know. So you have this document. It accuses the president of these salacious things. Where did it come from? Who generated it? He said, well, I was told he was, a legitimate source, Steele, and that was, I guess, good enough for him. But they didn't. The FBI at one point considered paying Steele and bringing him on, and then they decided not to. So they must have known something was up with his credibility.
Right. I mean, he got fired by the FBI for lying about the fact that he didn't or did leak to the media. Yeah. That was not told to the president-elect. And I think that the other thing that stuck out to me was about the leaking of the memos. Again, he pushed back on the word leak. I tried to get FBI protocol and the employment thing that he signed about what a leak is, but whether it's classified or not, it was work product that he had as an FBI director that he worked on, that he gave to this Columbia professor. He said it was a good friend, but it turns out he was also working at the FBI. Why does that matter? Well, what was his job? He was what? He was a valve. He was a guy that you gave stuff to. He also confirmed that the memos, including what now were considered classified memos, went to 3 other people. And we know that the FBI had to scrub the computer of one of those people after that because of intelligence. So where this goes, I don't know, but he confirmed that he talked to the IG, the Inspector General, about this very handling of memos.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see what the IG finds about that, because that's the major bone of contention right now with the soundbite that you played from President Trump this morning, saying that he believes that James Comey is a leaker. He was much rougher on him than just that. And James Comey said, absolutely not. I never leaked anything. Those were my private memories. I thought of them as sort of a diary that I was putting together, and it was my right as a private citizen, having been fired by the FBI, to hand them over. But they were generated on an FBI payroll and on FBI computers, we assume. So, I wonder, Brett, obviously we're going to look closely at that IG report to find out, which one of those is actually the case in the minds of the IG.
Well, that's right. And we don't know what we don't know about that IG report, but we do know that it's going to be coming out soon. According to lawmakers on the Hill, they think it's going to be explosive because he's been working on it for a long time. The other thing that struck me about the interview is when he said at the end that he would still be FBI director tonight. Listening to this media rollout and this media blitz about this book, which, by the way, has done very well selling, he has not shied away from saying saying that the president is morally unfit, that people should vote their conscience but not vote for this guy because he doesn't match the values and principles that I have and that the country should have. And yet he said, as of tonight, had he not been fired, he would still be working for this person, as he's lambasting Republicans for working with this person who was duly elected by the American public. Yeah. I just thought that was I tried to see if there's a disconnect in his mind, and there wasn't.
Fascinating. Brett, thank you so much. Great having you here tonight.
Thanks, Martha.
So Corey Lewandowski is with us as well this evening, and he has his reaction to this and other things that are cropping up in Trump land. Trump's former campaign manager. Corey, good evening. What went through your mind as you watched all of that?
Well, this is a man with maybe the greatest Messiah complex we've ever seen. I mean, this is a man who decides what is right and wrong. He decides what information should be given to the American people and what shouldn't. This is a man who's trying to justify the leaking of classified information, whether it's to his friend, to his attorneys, or to whoever he decides is appropriate. It's okay as long as he's made the decision. It doesn't matter what the FBI rules are. It doesn't matter what the protocols are. Jim Comey, who is using government documents, government information, government computers to put this information on, has decided that it is in his best interest to make it his personal diary, regardless of what the rules say. Jim Comey is the one who decides what's right and wrong for this country now.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you look back at the Hillary Clinton investigation and you think about the emails and the fact that they were done on a state server and that she had a private email address. You know, all of those same issues kind of converge. And the thinking in that investigation was that basically anything that was done under the auspices of Secretary of State on computers, discussing things with other people that you work with, was all considered to be government property. So it's interesting that it sounds like he holds himself to a slightly different standard there. I want to move on to some other things. The president lost Ronnie Jackson as his VA secretary prospect today. What do you think about that, Corey?
I think it's the very worst that Washington, D.C. has to offer. This is a man who served his country with distinction, both in the military overseas and here domestically. He served 3 presidents, never during his tenure when he has gone through 3 FBI background checks or had the opportunity to get his first star were any of these issues raised. And now this president puts him up to be the secretary of the VA, and all of a sudden 23 unnamed sources come forward with stories which aren't corroborated, which have never been brought forth to take down a man who's clearly, by all accounts, even by the accounts of the Democrats and Barack Obama himself, has been phenomenal in his role as the chief physician to the president of the United States. This is everything that's wrong in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I mean, John Tester went after him with a hammer and put all of these things out there, and then went on national television and said, I can't say 100% sure that these things are actually happened. So it was basically his word against the word of Dr. Jackson. But the president this morning went after Tester. He said that he thinks he's going to pay for what he did. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, I think what you're going to see is John Tester is going to be held accountable at the ballot box in November. The state of Montana is a state that Donald Trump won by more than 20 points. It's a state that historically votes very conservatively. And now the people of Montana have seen the real John Tester. This is a man who comes to Washington, says one thing, goes back to Montana and says something different. We've now seen him destroy a career of a superiorly qualified individual to be the secretary of the VA because he wants to play partisan politics.
One more quick question for you. Rudy Giuliani in the mix now. Is he going to broach a deal for the president to sit down with Robert Mueller?
Well, I love the fact that Rudy is now part of the president's legal team. I think he's the right person. He has the political skills. He has the legal skills. And I think what you're going to do is see Mayor Giuliani negotiate with Robert Mueller to come to a resolution as it relates to the president, to bring a conclusion to this fake investigation where there's been no collusion with the president and any outside sources. So I think that's what the mayor's going to focus on. And I think it's very important to have the American people bring that to a conclusion as well.
There was a report today that said that Mueller reiterated that he would like a chance to ask Trump questions about the steps he took during the transition and early months of the administration. He emphasized that an interview is essential for investigators to understand Trump's intent in making key decisions as they seek to wrap up the portion of the probe focused on potential obstruction of justice. Quick thought.
No obstruction of justice whatsoever. Look, I think this has been very clear. This investigation has now been going for almost a year and a half. It's spent millions of taxpayer dollars. It's time to end it.
Corey Lewandowski, always good to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coming up next, what a day for the man who used to be known as America's dad. Bill Cosby, guilty on 3 counts of sexual assault.
It's been a very long journey, but this is an historic result.
In a landmark verdict for the Me Too movement, the comedian will likely spend the rest of his life in prison because dozens of women were brave enough to come forward with their stories, and it was adjudicated in a court of law today. Attorney Kimberly Guilfoyle and Mark Thiessen on the impact on the culture and the country from this case. Also, 2 former NFL cheerleaders suing the NFL for discrimination. They are willing to make a deal for just $1, but they have some conditions. Bailey Davis and Christian Ann Ware join us again exclusively with their proposal for the NFL next.
I guess it is kind of a double standard, you know, where the football players are held to and then what women are held to in the NFL.
America's dad, what a stunning moment this was in the courtroom. Found guilty on 3 charges of aggravated assault. The details of this case were horrific. The 80-year-old could now spend the rest of his life behind bars. It is obviously just an unbelievable fall from grace for this man who found fame in stand-up. He befriended athletes and presidents. He wrote books about fatherhood.
You really don't have to worry about cheese. You just stop. Hey, stop! No, come on, stop. Look, the 2 of you. Did you tell Denise she could go out on a date tonight?
Yes, I did.
Well, have you seen the boy?
Yes, I have.
Well, how?
Trace Gallagher, live in our West Coast newsroom. Boy, those were the good old days for Bill Cosby. Today was not one of those, Trace.
No, not at all. When the verdict was read, Martha, the courtroom erupted. Prosecutors hugged and Cosby's accusers cried. Those inside the court say Bill Cosby himself stared straight ahead, showing little, if any, emotion. But that quickly changed when District Attorney Kevin Steele demanded that Cosby go straight to jail. When Steele told the judge that Cosby has an airplane and could flee, the former TV star called Steele an a-hole, shouting, "I'm sick of you." The judge decided that because of Cosby's age and his health, he would remain free until sentencing. The trial itself lasted 2 weeks, with accuser Andrea Constand telling the jury that Cosby knocked her out with blue pills and then sexually violated her. 5 other women also testified that Cosby drugged and raped them, but the star defense witness told the jury that Andrea Constand once told her that she could frame a high-profile person. And during their 14 hours of deliberations, the jury of 7 men and 5 women asked the court to read back the testimony of that star defense witness, leading some experts to believe the jury was leaning toward acquittal. That was not to be. Andrea Constand did not address the media, but here's one of Cosby's other accusers, followed by the DA. Watch.
Today, this jury has shown that what the Me Too movement has saying is that women are worthy of being believed. And I thank the jury. I thank the prosecution.
What was revealed through this investigation was a man who had spent decades preying on women that he drugged and sexually assaulted, and a man who had evaded this moment here today for far too long.
Defense attorney Tom Mesereau, who successfully defended Michael Jackson against child molestation charges back in 2005, had this to say.
We are very disappointed by the verdict. We don't think Mr. Cosby is guilty of anything, and the fight is not over. Thank you.
And recall that during a deposition given a decade ago, Bill Cosby acknowledged he gave quaaludes to women he wanted to have sex with, saying, quote, the same as a person would say, have a drink. So far, no sentencing date, but Pennsylvania state law requires it be within 90 days. Martha.
Trace, thank you very much. Kimberly Guilfoyle, an attorney and co-host of The Five. Mark Thiessen, an American Enterprise Institute scholar and a Fox News contributor, join me now. Kimberly, let me start with you on this. I was fascinated by your coverage on this today. Obviously, with your background, this is something you understand very well. What did you think of this verdict?
Yeah, this was it was a compelling verdict and really a seminal moment, in terms of the prosecution of sexual assault cases. When I worked at the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office and the San Francisco DA's office, this is one of my areas of specialties, and working with victims, people who have been aggrieved by sexual predators. And he actually would furnish, supply, and groom them with drugs, with Benadryl, something so that he could overcome them. And even more insidious than that is that they would be unable to maybe identify or recollect to be able to go forward to report a case or a crime. That's what you see in some of these situations, because they want to be able to go on and move on to the next victim. So the jury coming back with this verdict, I thought was compelling. 3 counts. He's looking at 30 years total, 10 for each. The judge will have a determination at sentencing, and there'll be sentencing memos provided and sentencing hearings where you'll be able to hear from some of the victims, victim impact statements.
That's going to be interesting.
Really powerful and important for people who have been the victim of sexual assault to have some kind of expression, to feel validated as a human being, because you live in so much shame and sorrow and upset and anxiety for so many years, especially people being called names like this woman was in the courtroom.
Yeah, no, it was stunning. And Mark, one of the things that I thought was so fascinating and satisfying in a way about what happened today is with all of this Me Too movement that we've watched going on, and so much of it has been adjudicated in the court of public opinion. This was adjudicated in a courtroom. And I thought that was a big moment for all of this, because this was laid out for a jury. The first case was a mistrial. Again, they went back. This is the way that it is supposed to work.
Right.
Absolutely, and I think it's probably the first of many. If I was Harvey Weinstein, I would be looking nervously at the news today about Bill Cosby. But look, this is also a great week for the long arm of the law. I mean, we just after 42 years on the run, the authorities just apprehended the Golden State Killer, a guy who raped and murdered tons of women, and now we've got Bill Cosby, who is in his 80s. He's evaded justice for these crimes for decades, and he's finally receiving justice as well. So the long arm of the law, people, the lesson of all this is if you stick with it, if you don't give up, if you demand justice, eventually the justice system works.
The prosecutor was so moved today when he was speaking, and he had his whole team there. He talked about their dedication, the other things they gave up to stick to this case, and I thought it was a very
you live together with with the detectives, the witnesses, and you become almost family. I did that in the dog mullet case.
Absolutely feel that with them. I want to ask you both about Alfie Evans, this case of a little child who is in a London hospital, and they're refusing to release him. He has a degenerative neurological disorder, although his father says he never has really been convinced that he's been properly diagnosed. Kimberly, they won't allow the parents to remove him. He's been accepted by a hospital in Italy. That's what the parents want to do. Why on earth, how can you keep a parent from taking their child to a different hospital?
Well, you think it really does go very much so to the core of parental rights. And can you imagine not being able to take your child that you love and be able to do something that you want, to provide dignity and comfort with a hospital that's already accepted? You think that they would work cooperatively in the best interest of parents that are grieving and suffering enough. But the laws are very different as well, in the UK. And so they really are quite adamant and aggressive in terms of how they handle these cases, and they almost take control of your own child.
It's unbelievable. As a parent, I just think, go in there and just grab your child and go out. That would be my gut feeling, Mark. What is going on here?
They can't do that because the British government has placed 30 police officers outside the hospital to prevent them from doing it. I mean, Alfie Evans is literally a hostage of the British government. They are not just letting him die, they are killing him. Literally. And, the doctors aren't always right. The doctor testified in court that he would probably take a few breaths after the ventilation was removed and then would die very quickly. And it's now we're going into our 4th day where he's breathing on his own. So what I don't understand is why are the British so determined to make sure that Alfie dies in that hospital room?
They're treating him like property or chattel, and it's really disgusting because there's no human dignity there. The parents want to love and take care of him. It's something gone horribly wrong.
And they're essentially saying we know better than the parents.
Right.
Thank you very much, you guys. I got to leave it there. Great to see you both, really. Thank you so much. So coming up next tonight, President Trump becoming a big player on the world stage after historic and successful meetings, by most accounts, with the French President Emmanuel Macron this week. But critics say that they don't think it went all that well. White House veteran Bill Bennett with his take. Also, Kanye West. Have you ever heard the name Kanye West so often on news? And, you know, it's really incredible what's going on here. He's not backing down for his support of President Trump, despite his famous friends who are texting him and trying to convince him to come to their way of thinking. Karl Rove and Juan Williams on that and a few more things when we come back.
He sees that stuff, and he's smart. And he says, you know what? Trump is doing a much better job than the Democrats did.
Thank you. Thank you.
I like him a lot.
Well, you know, that was fun, right? So the president's critics have insisted that he has no friends, really, on the world stage. Now there is concern that there was too much affection. And there's a pretty clear effort to turn what appeared to be, overall, a pretty successful meeting between these two into something very different. Check out these headlines. Macron embraces Trump and elegantly knifes him in the back. Macron treats Congress to a full-scale takedown of Trumpism. After the hugs and kisses, Macron rips Trumpism. So is that what happened? Here now, Bill Bennett, former Secretary of Education under President Reagan and a Fox News contributor. Bill, good to see you as always. So would you call what the French president did over his stay a sound rejection of Trumpism?
No, it was a 1/3 or maybe 1/2 rejection. This is the French, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We've been dealing with them for 250 years, and you know, this happens with the French. Look, the morning of the before Macron addressed Congress on my podcast, I said, all right, I've seen all the hugs, I've seen all the kisses, the handshakes, the taking of the you know, the dandruff off of Macron's jacket. Enough. Let's go. Get on the plane and go back. And then he gives this speech to Congress, in which he attacks nationalism.
You don't sound like you like the French very much,
Donald
Bill.
Trump is. No, I like them fine, but I like them, you know, 2/3. They're not, you know, I mean, that this is, you get to know the French. And I appreciate Lafayette and I appreciate Rochambeau, but, you know, there are a lot more Americans buried in France than French buried here. You know, it's always been one-sided. I thought the president extended himself beautifully. Macron reciprocated somewhat. But most important thing, the president is marching on, and his foreign policy objectives are strong, and he's having serious meetings. It's a serious meeting with Macron, particularly about Iran and other things, despite the fact that Macron wants us back with the Paris Peace Accord. Angela Merkel's now in town, and look at those pictures of Mike Pompeo with Kim Jong-un. This is pretty good stuff for a novice president. He's doing better in the beginning of his second year than Obama did at year 8.
I mean, it's fascinating when you look at, you know, when you sort of put those two things up against each other, this notion that he doesn't have any friends around the world, doesn't get along well with people, and you look at the bridges that have opened with President Xi in China, the difference that has made in North Korea, the alliance that we have seen building with Syria, and now you've got the invitation to the United Kingdom as well. I'm sure Theresa May was watching all of this very closely as well. But, you know, my take on the speech to Congress, Bill, was that he, you know, you have a couple of audiences when you're in Macron's situation. You have the folks at home who you have to, you know, throw an olive branch to. He had to say something positive about the Paris Accord and say that he would encourage the president to come back in, you know, and then also you have the audience here at home and you have the president, of course. But, you know, I think that's just what foreign leaders do when they're in the middle of these things. They have to make sure that they kind of, you know, walk that line to some extent. And I think that's what he was doing.
It's yeah, he went a little further than that, though. He didn't say, you know, he hopes he'll reconsider. He said the president will come back to the Paris Accord. You think he will? I don't think he will. Then he attacks nationalism. You got to think that's funny, Martha. Frenchmen attacking nationalism. Does any country love itself as much as the French love themselves? Again, you know, I like France fine. Two-thirds of the way. I like America better. I like the way our president extended himself, didn't give him the back of the hand. I don't think that Donald Trump gave the back of the hand in France when he was there. I don't recall that. And he's a guy who gives lots of back of the hands.
Bill, thank you very much. Always good to see you, sir. So coming up now.
You're always welcome.
Thank you very much. All right, Karl Rove is here, former Deputy Chief of Staff under President George W. Bush, I should say, and a Fox News contributor. Juan Williams, co-host of The Five and a Fox News political analyst. Good to see both of you tonight. Quick thoughts on the Pompeo picture with Kim Jong-un and the future of Mike Pompeo as Secretary of State. Juan, let me start with you.
Well, I mean, so it's all good. I mean, I would like to know that, in fact, something comes of this, and the potential is great because President Trump indicated this morning on Fox and Friends that Kim Jong-un was not not scheduled to meet with Mike Pompeo. So it was a surprise meeting and hopefully an indication that things are thawing.
It looks like they were getting along great. Carl, what do you think?
Well, going to be tough from here on out. The only reason that there are positive signals coming out of North Korea is the harshness of the sanctions that the administration with China and Russia and everybody else aboard has been able to install on the North Korean regime. And Kim has, before him, his father and his grandfather have played this game before, and we got to be very careful. But my sense is Pompeo and Trump are clear-eyed about this and realize that the easy part is getting them to the table. The hard part is getting them to make actual changes in their nuclearization program and their missile program.
When you look at the impact that these sanctions have had on North Korea, their numbers have plummeted in terms of what is coming in there. They are in a very desperate situation at this point, and that may push the needle in a way that it hasn't been pushed before. So we will see. So that being said, it's hard to make a segue from Kim Jong-un over to Kanye, but I do want to get your thoughts on this story because I find it very interesting. The rapper Kanye West not backing down today from his support for President Trump and unloading on Twitter, accusing fellow musician John Legend of, quote, trying to manipulate his free thought. West sharing part of a text exchange between the two. Legend saying in part, I hope you'll reconsider aligning yourself with Trump. You're way too powerful and influential to endorse who he is and what he stands for. Kanye responded, I love you, John, and I appreciate your thoughts. You bringing up my fans or my legacy is a tactic based on fear used to manipulate my free thought. Very interesting. Gentlemen, Carl, what do you think about all that?
Well, look, anytime the African Americans are predominantly Democrat, and anytime somebody breaks from that orthodoxy, they tend to become a target. And it seems to me Mr. West has made a decision that he likes the economic performance of this administration and its impact on African American unemployment. And as a result, he's saying positive things about President Trump. But it's very odd, the vitriol and the pressure and the threats and the subtle cajoling that takes place when somebody breaks from the orthodoxy inside the African-American community.
I mean, that's the problem, isn't it, Juan? You're supposed to march in step with whatever identity group you fit in with. I think of Rick Grinnell today, who is the first openly gay, highest-ranking officer in the American government. He's had so much backlash for being a conservative over the years. I think even about Hillary Clinton and the comment that she made about how women, sort of went in lockstep. They were convinced by their husbands to vote for Trump because no woman she couldn't imagine would ever want to do that. We need to break open these ideas. Is this going somewhere in the direction of doing that?
No. And by the way, the president, again, on Fox and Friends this morning indicated that he thought Kanye was responding to the drop in African-American unemployment. I don't think Kanye West is paying attention to unemployment numbers or economic figures. I think what this is about is Kanye saying, when he was hospitalized, nobody reached out, but Trump offered him a meeting at Trump Tower. The idea that all black people think alike and can't think for themselves, to me, is crazy. I mean,
agreed. That's the point.
But this is not it. I mean, if you ask black Americans, Carl's exactly right about the numbers, but if you ask them about Charlottesville, about S-hole countries, about Trump describing black neighborhoods as worse than Afghanistan, people might reach the conclusion, this guy's not for me. And I think that's if you had Kanye West speaking substantively to points and saying, here is the argument for Donald Trump in terms of the black community. Okay, but that's not what this is. This is like a lonely child reaching out saying, well, you know what? Obama said I was a jerk for the way I treated Taylor Swift, but guess what? Trump invited me in. That's about the extent of it. But I see that conservatives think, oh, well, this is a game changer.
I think what sparked it was Candace Owens, and he was listening to her, and he agreed with some of the things that she said, and he had the gall to say that.
No, he just said it was free thinking. You can have any opinion. Carl and I argue all the time. You can have free thinking,
so
but that's not it. Carl has real points to make.
All right, I get it. Thank you, guys.
Look, Kanye West. Kanye West has an opinion. He's expressed it. Juan may dismiss it. Juan may devalue it, but he had an opinion, and he expressed his support for President Trump, and that's a reality. And inside the African American community, that has been widely panned, but it doesn't remove the fact that Kanye West has legitimate reasons to express support for President Trump, and you ought to respect that and acknowledge it.
I think we need to break open these notions of everybody's supposed to vote in a certain identity group. And I think it's good to provoke this kind of conversation. Gentlemen, thank you. Good to see both of you tonight.
You're welcome.
You bet, guys. So coming up, an alarming warning from one of our top military leaders about electronic warfare. We have talked about this quite a bit on this story. Now the Air Force is saying that there is a big issue with what's going on in Syria and our planes. Plus, new developments in the fight for equality in the NFL. A new proposal from two cheerleaders who filed discrimination lawsuits against the league. Bailey Davis and Kristen Ann Ware join me exclusively straight ahead.
I want to see equal rules for both of us. We're both professional athletes. We've worked hard to be professional dancers, just like they have to be professional athletes, and especially that there's a double standard.
Right now in Syria, we're in the most aggressive EW environment on the planet from our adversaries. They're testing us every day, knocking our communications down, disabling our AC-130s, et cetera.
Unbelievable. That is alarming. And that came from the head of U.S. Special Operations, saying EW, as you heard him say there, electronic warfare, is now one of the military's biggest problems in Syria. Our enemies are able to disable American planes that are providing air support to U.S. commandos on the ground. That is not a good situation. The generals go to Russian forces jamming the U.S. drones in the region. Joining me now, Rebecca Grant, a national security and military analyst and former director of the General Mitchell Institute for Air Power. Rebecca, welcome back to the story. Good to have you with us tonight. That's disturbing. Let's put up the picture again of the AC-130. So they are able to jam the AC-130's ability to communicate with people on the ground. What are these AC-130s doing? What are they providing for us there?
The AC-130 is a highly capable gunship, and it provides direct fire and also some ISR. So the Russians are trying to interfere with the HF and UHF radio frequencies. I don't think they're being as effective as they'd like to be, but this is all Putin. Russia developed new electronic warfare capabilities in Ukraine, and now they have brought all of that to Syria to test out on the U.S.-led coalition and our partners.
How do we fight back against that?
Well, we fight back against that. First of all, this is not going to stop the anti-ISIS mop-up operations. But what's really needed here, and SOCOM knows this, they've got some wonderful radios. What we have from U.S. industry is secure waveforms. We have the ability to rebuild and reform these agile combat networks because, Martha, the coalition is on the net all the time, connected with radios to a lot of different devices. And so, but what the Pentagon needs to do is to accelerate the testing and fielding of some of our newer systems and our smart data systems. That's why the Russians are such a threat, and our military strategy calls for us to counter this.
Let's play this soundbite quickly, and I want to get your thoughts on it from General Mattis, talking about what we're doing next in Syria. Watch.
If we withdraw our troops from Syria now, will we have finished the fight against ISIS?
Right now, Senator, we are not withdrawing. You'll see a re-energized effort against the Middle Euphrates River Valley in the days ahead, and against the rest of the caliphate, the geographic caliphate. And this is an ongoing fight right now.
Fair to say that a holding force right now without us would be a risky proposition for a while to come.
I'm confident that that we would probably regret it.
What do you make of that?
We have special operations and other forces there on the ground helping our Syrian Defense Force partners, especially up in that northeast corner. Mattis is 100% right. He's cleaning out the areas along the Euphrates River Valley. We need to have more stabilization so that some rebuilding can go on there. And that's why the Russian activity is so dangerous. But make no mistake, Russia is really pushing us in Syria.
Rebecca Grant, thank you very much. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Coming up next, former NFL cheerleaders are fighting back against what they are calling a double standard for the male athletes and the female athletes associated with the NFL. They just want $1 and a meeting with Roger Goodell to settle this. Bailey Davis and Christian Ann Ware leading the charge. Join me next. Minutes from now, the 2018 NFL Draft will kick off, but not entirely without controversy. Several former NFL cheerleaders have filed discrimination lawsuits against the league. They say that there's a double standard when it comes to the rules that the players have to live under and the rules that those who cheer them on live under. Now, two women are taking their fight for equality directly to the top. Bailey Davis and Christian Ann Ware say that they will accept a $1 settlement in exchange for a good faith 4-hour meeting with Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner. Also in that proposal, as a hedge against retaliation, teams that currently have squads would not be able to disband them for a minimum of 5 years. Davis, a former New Orleans Saints cheerleader, says she was fired after posting this photo of herself on Instagram. And Ware, a former Miami Dolphins cheerleader, says she was told in no uncertain terms they did not want her to speak out about the fact that she was a virgin or talk about her faith. We reached out to the NFL for comment on the settlement offer. They said, in part, quote, everyone who works in the NFL, including cheerleaders, have the right to work in a positive and respectful environment that is free from all forms of harassment and discrimination. Here now exclusively the former NFL cheerleaders at the center of all this, Bailey Davis and Christian Ann Ware, and their attorney, Sarah Blackwell. Good to have all of you with us tonight. So in terms of what you want, Bailey, what would satisfy you in your gripe, and I think it's justifiable. That picture that we just showed of you is not particularly revealing. I mean, let's face it, you guys wear like teeny little things when you're out there cheerleading. So why was that a problem? Because the players can post whatever pictures they want, right?
Right. Well, the contract says we can't post nude, semi-nude, or in lingerie. And in my opinion, semi-nude is a swimsuit or our uniform. We have a swimsuit calendar and our uniform is two-piece, but the players can post shirtless and it's seen as athletic. But they said that it linked me to a rumor that I was at a party with a player and that I was seeking players' attention with the photo, but it was on my private social media account.
Why are you not allowed to go to a party with the players?
We're not allowed to be anywhere that the players are. If we're in a restaurant and a player walks in, we have to leave.
It seems like a little interesting, doesn't it? Do you think that's wrong?
Oh, of course. It's completely discriminating. The players have no such rule like that. It's completely up to us to run away from them and hide because they say they're going to prey on us.
All right. Christian Ann, in terms of what you're looking for in this if you could sit down with Roger Goodell, what would you tell him?
Well, first of all, I would be really thankful just to have the opportunity to seek positive change. That would mean so much to me. And I can only speak from my experience, but because of what I've witnessed and what I've went through, I believe I can help with the change because of what I've seen. We can come up with fair, professional, lawful rules, as well as a fresh new idea. So
Sarah, you've given them till May 4 to respond. What do you expect you're going to get for this?
Well, May 4th was 10 days to respond, not to say yes or no. They can call, negotiate, ask for extension. But after 10 days, if they don't respond at all, then that's code that we're not interested at all. But I'm very optimistic that they will at least contact us and give us a chance to speak to them because, like the statement they said is, the NFL thinks that cheerleaders should have a right to the positive, fair atmosphere and that it should be free of sexual harassment and discrimination. And that's what we believe. And that's why we want to have a collaboration. We're on the same side. And we're not asking them to spend any money. We're asking them to talk to us about certain rules and regulations that they can require the teams to make that will treat them with fair professionalism.
The New York Times ran a piece that basically said that groping and sexual harassment were part of the job. Did you feel that way?
Right. We had to go out amongst the fans. They're drinking. I've had my arm grabbed. I've had my butt grabbed. They'll pull stuff out of our hands. We're walking around with cash because we're selling calendars. And we have to do that to be able to go onto the field. And we're just told to smile and be polite and walk away if it gets too much. And there was an instance where I did come in the locker room crying, and they told me just to toughen up.
Christian Ann, did you have experience like that?
I personally didn't. We had security guards with us, so I'm really thankful for that, but I'm really sad for the other teams that they had to go through things like that.
Yeah, there are reports that people were told to go to a fan's house and, hang out with them. I mean, would they ever do that to the football players?
No, of course not. And when we did have to do those things, we were in black cocktail dresses. They wanted us in the little black dresses.
So did you ever just say, like, you know what, I'm out. Like, this isn't really for me. This is not what I signed up for.
No, I mean, honestly, being an NFL cheerleader is an honor, and we were told many times, you're replaceable. If you don't want to do this, there's 100 other girls that would do it for free, and it was my dream job, so I did what I had to.
So why just the dollar? Do you think that they deserve more monetary damages in some of these cases if there's groping and harassment involved?
Well, of course, they deserve a lot of money, and offering them a dollar settlement demand with the meeting, they don't benefit at all from this because they're not cheerleaders anymore. So even if the rules and regulations are put in place, only the ones there now and the ones to come. So it's very sacrificial, and I hope it shows the NFL and everyone that we're here for empowerment of women and for their rights.
Good for you. Very interesting. We'll follow it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So still ahead tonight, the White House takes part in Take Your Kids to Work Day with a bit of a surprise visit from the president. Wait till you hear what he said to them.
Here you go, honey. You have a nice father about 80% of the time, okay?